Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Honourable James SEFTON representing the government, Mr. Hawkins, Honourable Mike Moore, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to you all, whether you're recipients or family or friends. My wife and I and members of our household welcome you all here this morning. We're delighted to share this ceremony with you. We find these occasions really exciting, stimulating and quite humbling as we hear what people in our land do and we see the people coming forward to receive the awards for the work and the service that they've done. This is the fourth investiture we've had this week, and this week has been a little different. Normally we only have 3, but we've had 4 this year and this week, and it's been marked in a particular way. In the first place, it's the first time on which members of the Order of New Zealand, limited generally to 20 living New Zealanders, have been admitted to the Order in a public ceremony such as this. On Tuesday, Cardinal Williams was admitted to the Order, and today Mr. Moore will be. And then we've also, at this particular investiture time, recognised, along with many, many other people, our servicemen and women and civilians who've worked and served in the rather difficult and often dangerous area of East Timor. And you'll see some of them are here this morning too. We've had them during the week, and so that's marked this week out a little differently from others. But on the other hand, this is a week in which we've recognised New Zealanders who've contributed in all sorts of ways to our national life. And I'm sure you'll join with me in applauding what they've done and in rejoicing with them on the honours that have been conferred upon them. Now we proceed to the formalities. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I have it on command from Her Majesty the Queen to hold an investiture on her behalf and to confer the honour of a member of the Order of New Zealand on the Right Honourable Mike Moore, and the honour of Distinguished Companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit on Mr. Russell COUTTS of Auckland. And I have it on command to present to the other ladies and gentlemen present here this morning the various insignia, decorations and medals to which they're entitled. And I know you'll, as I've said, I think you'll join with me in applauding them and congratulating them on their very well-merited awards. I'd ask the Official Secretary if he would summon those whom Her Majesty has seen fit to honour.
Your Excellency, to receive the insignia of a member of the Order of New Zealand, the Right Honourable Mike Moore of Christchurch, currently of Geneva, Switzerland. Mr. Moore was a Member of Parliament from 1972 to 1975 and from 1978 until 1999. He resigned from Parliament to take up his current appointment as Director General of the World Trade Organization in Geneva. In 1972, he was the youngest person to be elected to Parliament, and in the course of his long parliamentary career, Mr. Moore was a Minister of the Crown from 1984 until 1990, holding the portfolios of Overseas Trade and Marketing, External Relations and Trade, Foreign Affairs, Tourism, and Recreation and Sport. From 4 September to 2 November 1990, Mr. Moore was Prime Minister of New Zealand, and from 1990 to 1993, he was leader of the New Zealand Labour Party. To receive the insignia of a Distinguished Companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit, Mr. Russell COUTTS of Auckland, for services to yachting, especially the 2000 America's Cup Challenge. Mr. COUTTS was the skipper-helmsman for both Team New Zealand's winning challenge for the America's Cup in 1995 and their successful defence in 1999. His long career in yachting includes more than 20 first-class line honours and an Olympic gold medal in the Finn class at the 1984 Games in Los Angeles. Mr. COUTTS was the winner of the Match Racing World Championships in 1992, 1993 and 1996. In 1996, he skippered Team Magic, which won both the World Match Racing Championship and the Brute Cup Racing Series. To receive the insignia of a companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit, the Honourable Robert SMELLIE of Auckland, for services as a judge of the High Court from 1985 to 1998. He is a former chairman of the Equal Opportunities Tribunal and was the senior judge in Auckland at the time of his retirement. Mr. SMELLIE served as Chancellor from 1975 to 1981 and Vice-Chancellor since 1981 to the Anglican Archdiocese of Melanesia. Your Excellency, may I now call on the Acting Secretary and Registrar of the Queen's Service Order and the Herald of the New Zealand Order of Merit to summon others who have received appointments to those orders.
Your Excellency, to receive the insignia of a Companion of the Queen's Service Order for Community Service, Mr. Jim RAWIRI of HAMMILL. Mr. RAWIRI's deep knowledge of Maori protocol and culture has meant that his influence and reputation have spread far beyond his own community. He is widely regarded as an advisor, counsellor, spokesman, teacher and judge of cultural competitions. For 20 years, he has had a key role in the running of the National Youth Cultural Festivals. Mr. RAWIRI has been involved in many marae-based schemes to provide health, education, cultural and social and employment development for young people. To receive the insignia of a Companion of the Queen's Service Order for Public Services, Dr. Jill HAMMILL of Dunedin. Dr. HAMMILL has been engaged in the research and management of archaeological and historic sites in Otago for 30 years. Her survey work has recorded numerous valuable archaeological, Maori and historic sites in Otago and Southland, and she has frequently undertaken investigations in the remote parts of the high country. Dr. HAMMILL is a past chairperson of the Otago Regional Committee of the New Zealand Historic Places Trust and has been file keeper for the New Zealand Archaeological Association for the Eastern Otago for nearly 20 years. She has served as a member of the Otago Conservation Board. Mr. Graham White of North Shore City. Mr. White has given 39 years service to medical education and laid the foundation for the training of many doctors. In 1967, he joined the new Auckland School of Medicine and helped plan the first-year course for medical students. He was the founding section head of the physico-chemistry, a position he retained until 1998. He was also sub-dean for student affairs. In 1984, Mr. White was appointed a member of the Council of the Auckland Institute of Technology, which he chaired from 1991 until 1995. To receive the insignia of an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit, Mr. Gordon Pullar of Gore, for services to farming in the community. Mr. Pullar pioneered the development of grain drying facilities and researched the production of sugar beet. He has held numerous senior positions in federated farmers groups in Southland. He has been Vice President of the Gore AMP Association, Director of the Alliance Freezing Company and the Phosphate Commission, as well as an advisor to the NZBC on Southern Regional Programming. Mr. Pullar is currently a Seddon Hospital trustee, chairman of the Sherry Seymour Trust, and active with Lions, the IHC and the Foundation for the Blind. Mr. Ron Sang of Auckland, for services to architecture and the arts. Mr. Sang, an architect, has been a patron of New Zealand arts for many years. He is a leading collector of ceramics, painting, glass and sculpture. As well as supporting artists financially, he often provides exhibition opportunities by making his own home and office available as venues. He has designed many award-winning public and private buildings. Mr. Sang is an active member of the Chinese community in New Zealand and has helped many new immigrants to settle in Auckland. Mr. James SEFTON of Auckland, for services to yachting. Mr. SEFTON, until recently, was the Executive Director of Team New Zealand and has a long involvement with yachting. He helped develop the media program for New Zealand's entry into the Whitbread Round the World race in 1991-92 and was media advisor for the 1988 and 1992 America's Cup Challenges. He was involved in the first New Zealand Challenge in 1984 and helped establish Team New Zealand in 1995. Mr. SEFTON is a former international soccer player representing New Zealand on 15 occasions. Mr. Ronald SHARP of Hamilton, for services to dairy farming. Mr. SHARP revolutionised the dairy industry in New Zealand with his invention of the herringbone cowshed, sometimes referred to as stoopless milking. The herringbone shed improved milking efficiency by allowing farmers to milk more cows per person and thus cut labour costs. An eminent dairy scientist has said, "The advent of the herringbone cowshed is the greatest invention since the invention of the milking machine." Mr. Sharp has been an active member of many farming and community organisations. Inspector Ray Sutton of Rotorua for services in East Timor. Inspector Sutton joined the New Zealand Police in 1969 and has served continuously in Rotorua. He is also an experienced member of the Armed Defenders Squad. In 1999, he was promoted to Temporary Superintendent to lead a contingent of 10 New Zealand police officers to East Timor in preparation for the elections to be held there. He was assigned by the United Nations to the position of Officer in Charge of UN Civilian Police in the Quisha, which was recognised as one of the most difficult areas, largely occupied by militia. In July 1999, armed militia attacked a convoy, which resulted in his decision to evacuate all UN personnel by road. His leadership and judgment were excellent during this difficult assignment. Mrs. Cynthia Van ASCH of Christchurch for services to the disabled. Mrs. Van ASCH, with her husband, established the Hohepa Homes in Christchurch to provide special care for the disabled, based on the philosophies of Rudolf Steiner. In 1960, she became a member of the Hohepa Trust Board and in 1962 began organising the Canterbury Group. Mrs. Van ASCH's contribution was to identify properties, obtain funding and raise public awareness and support for 3 homes that were first established. Today, the Canterbury complex has 12 homes where 60 residents and 20 day attendees work in craft workshops, tutorial, kitchen, garden and farm.
To receive the insignia of a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit, Ms. Karen GUILLILAND of Christchurch, for services to midwifery. Ms. GUILLILAND, National Director of the New Zealand College of Midwives since 1991, was recently appointed to the New Zealand Health Strategy Reference Group 2000. She has held many positions on national and international health, nursing and midwifery advisory bodies. Ms. GUILLILAND chaired the Family Health Trust for 7 years and was a delegate to the National Council of Women from 1995 to 1999. Mr. Gordon Hassel of Timor, for services to mountaineering and search and rescue. Mr. Hassel was the first person to climb all 27 New Zealand peaks over 10,000 feet and all 31 New Zealand peaks over 3,000 metres. For more than 40 years, he has been involved with the New Zealand Mountain Clubs, the Mountain Safety Council, and the National Parks Board in the Mount Cook area. Mr. Hassel has been equally committed to New Zealand land search and rescue since 1951 and has been the Timaru District Search Advisor since 1969. Detective Superintendent Peter Marshall of North Shore City. Detective Superintendent Marshall took charge of the police security arrangements for Operation APEC in 1999, which culminated in the APEC leaders meeting in Auckland in September 1999. Security was provided for 21 world leaders at the meeting. Detective Superintendent Marshall also oversaw the planning for 3 APEC state visits, which immediately followed the meeting and involved venues throughout New Zealand. Mr. Arthur Rahman of North Shore City, for services to race relations. Mr. Rahman founded the Bangladesh Association of New Zealand and the Bangladesh New Zealand Friendship Society, of which he became president. He initiated the Bangladesh Weekend School to help families retain their language and culture while increasing their understanding of New Zealand. Mr. Rahman is an executive member of the Auckland Ethnic Council and the Auckland Multicultural Society and is a member of the advisory board of the Unitec School of Languages. Mr. Airdrie Stewart of Dunedin, for services to pipe bands. Mr. Stewart is known throughout New Zealand, not only for his elegant playing and his success in championships and competitions, but also as a highly respected A-grade judge of pipe bands. He gives his time on a voluntary basis to teach young pipers. Mr. Stewart has also undertaken committee work over many years at local and provincial levels. In 1998, he was the chief organizer of the New Zealand Piping Championships, which will run as a part of Dunedin's 150th anniversary celebrations. Ms. Ruth Todd of Christchurch, for services to women and to literature. Ms. Todd's radio programs have promoted authors and publishers, as well as reviewers, interviewers, and commentators. Since 1992, she has produced and presented on Plains FM Women on Air, a 3-hour Saturday morning program celebrating women's contributions to their communities. In recent years, Ms. Todd has organized book festivals, taking a special interest in promoting work by women, and since 1997, produced bookmarks for national radio. Mr. Tim Twist of Napier, for services to education and to the community. Mr. Twist has been Chair of the Council of the Eastern Institute of Technology for 12 years. For 19 years, he's been trustee and is currently Chair of the Hawke's Bay University Trust and the Otatara Trust. Mr. Twist has served as Secretary of the Napier Marriage Guidance Organisation, is a long-standing member of the Hawke's Bay District Society, and is on various committees of the New Zealand Law Society. Mrs. Pat Weaver of Hastings, for services to bowls. Mrs. Weaver's 37 years of dedicated service to her sport culminated in serving on the executive of the International Women's Bowls Board from 1984 to 1992, including 4 years as president. She was a selector and has worked in all aspects of the sports administration. In 1992, Mrs. Weaver was made a life member of the East Coast Women's Bowling Centre and patroness of her Hastings Bowling Club in 1993. Ms. Jill White of Palmerston North, for services to local body and to community affairs. Ms. White is the Mayor of Palmerston North. She served 3 terms as a City Councillor and was on the Wanganui Manawatu Regional Council from 1989 to 1994. Between 1992 and 1998, she was a Member of Parliament, resigning on her election as Mayor of Palmerston North. Ms. White is patron of the Palmerston North branches of the Multiple Sclerosis Society, the Asthma Society, and of Mobility. Ms. Dorothy Wilson of Waitakere City, for services to local body and to community affairs. Ms. Wilson, a former Deputy Mayor of Waitakere, and she served 11 years on the City Council. She has been patron of a number of community organisations, including the Save the Children Fund, the West Auckland Sexual Abuse Centre, and the Plunkett Association. In 1998, she was a founding member of the West Auckland Health Forum. She is active in the Parent-Teacher Association and on the council of 2 local schools. Ms. Wilson was National Coordinator of the Women's Electoral Lobby from 1984 to 1986. Flight Sergeant Craig Hewen of Coromandel. Flight Sergeant Hewen's final posting in the Royal New Zealand Air Force was as the Senior Non-Commissioned Officer in charge of avionics and modifications on No. 3 Squadron. During preparations for the 1999 APEC meeting, it was discovered that it was not possible to equip Iroquois helicopters with radios that would provide tactical support to counter terrorist operations. Flight Sergeant Hewen designed a system that would meet this requirement. This new system was subsequently proved in an operational environment when the squadron deployed to East Timor. Major John Knight of Upper Hutt. Major Knight was deployed to East Timor in June 1999 as a military liaison officer with the United Nations mission, preparing for the independence referendum. By early September, all UN staff and many refugees were confined to the compound in Dili as violence erupted. Major Knight organized unarmed patrols to monitor the situation and to retrieve supplies from a warehouse at the port. When the evacuation of East Timor took place, he was also responsible for planning the transfer to the airport of local and international UN staff, along with some 1,500 refugees. Squadron Leader Tony Davies of Rotorua, for services to the Royal New Zealand Air Force as a pilot. In the early hours of the morning of 12 August 1998, he was called on to begin planning, coordinating and directing a demanding and potentially hazardous night flight to Antarctica by a Hercules aircraft to uplift a seriously ill United States citizen for evacuation to Christchurch Hospital. Squadron Leader Davies' decisions had a critical bearing on the safe and successful completion of the mission. Squadron Leader Davies assessed the risks involved accurately, and he demonstrated a high degree of professionalism in the planning and direction of this operation. Flying Officer Jane Davies of Whanuapai. Flying Officer Davies was in charge of a Royal New Zealand Air Force Air Movements team based at Dili in East Timor. The team's task was the loading and unloading of military transport aircraft during the initial deployment of the international force. Conditions at Dili Airport were primitive, yet the airport had to handle over 30 flights each day operating around the clock. The achievements of the RNZAF air loading team can be largely attributed to Flying Officer Davies' strong leadership. Chief Petty Officer Gunnery Instructor Ricky Dirksen of Auckland. Chief Petty Officer Dirksen was posted at short notice to HMNZS Canterbury in August 1999 to help prepare for the ship's duty in East Timor. He was tasked with a variety of duties, above and beyond his normal role as the professional head of the gunnery team in the ship. These included preparing the ship for action, leading damage control action, preparing boarding parties and increasing weapon training to an operational level. Once on duty in East Timor, Chief Petty Officer Dirksen's gunnery skills were used to guard work parties. He coordinated preparations for guard duty and personally took charge of ensuring work parties were assisting the New Zealand Army. To receive the insignia of an honorary member of the New Zealand Order of Merit, Mr. Max Vish of Christchurch. For services to the community, Mr. Vish, a Dutch citizen, joined the Friends of the Christchurch Botanic Garden Society at its founding in 1989. His huge voluntary contribution consists of working in the gardens weekly, establishing and running a monthly series of guided walks, training other guides, relieving information centre staff on weekends, preparing displays and brochures, giving lectures and coordinating fundraising volunteers. Mr. Vish is an active committee member of the Canterbury Botanical Society.
Your Excellency, to receive the Queen's Service Medal for Community Service, Mrs. Jean Robinson of Auckland. Mrs. Robinson volunteers in many ways for a safer and more caring community, a fundraiser for the Special Olympics and Operation Kids. She is a leading organiser for neighbourhood support and the Blue Light Ventures. She single-handedly raises funds, organises venues, food, gifts and entertainment for her special luncheon dances to enrich the lives of South Auckland's elderly folk. Mrs. Robinson worked for the Boys Brigade, Sunday School and the local soccer group. Mrs. Jean Rudenclough of Christchurch. Mrs. Rudenclough's craft skills have benefited hospitals, children's institutions, the IHC for over many years. She has compiled over 500 scrapbooks, crocheted and made other craft items, written children's stories, and since 1956 produced over 600 paintings and drawings. Active in women's cricket as a player and selector and administrator since 1959, Mrs. Rudenclough was Vice President of the Canterbury Women's Cricket Association and twice of Lancaster Park Cricket Club. Mr. Kurt Schwartz of Wellington. Mr. Schwartz's voluntary activities in Wellington span 60 years. He helped establish the New Zealand Institute of Management in 1944 and is both a life member and a founding fellow of that organisation. He is a past chairman of the New Zealand Administrative Staff College Council and was on the Central Institute of Technology Council for 11 years. He has 39 years involvement with the Brunei Birth and 10 years with the New Zealand Council of Christians and Jews. A former volunteer for the Department of Social Welfare Budgeting Advice Service, Mr. Schwartz has been highly respected as a member of the Friends at Court since 1992. Mrs. Betty Thompson of Masterton. Mrs. Thompson has given many years voluntary service to the community. She has worked for the Meals on Wheels service for 31 years and provided transport for the sick and elderly for hospital and doctor's appointments. For the same period of time, she has been associated with the local branch of the Red Cross Society. Mrs. Thompson has been involved with the Samaritan services in the Wairarapa for over 20 years. Mrs. Mavis Warren of Upper Hutt. Mrs. Warren has given 58 years service to the community. She joined the Order of St John in 1941 and in 1987 became a regional superintendent, retiring 4 years later with a total of 49 years service. Mrs. Warren taught first aid at the Police College when it was at Trentham and has been a voluntary aide on hospital wards and at the Norman Kirk Home once a week for a number of years. Miss Maureen Whiting of Christchurch. Miss Whiting joined the North Canterbury branch of the Save the Children Fund in 1989, representing the Pan-Pacific and Southeast Asia Women's Association. She has been a tireless voluntary worker and on many occasions has served on committees, including the SHOP, Annual Appeal, and most notably, that responsible for the printing and publishing of the book, The First 50 Years of the North Canterbury Branch, A Canterbury Tale. Mrs. Whiting served as Canterbury Branch President from 1993 to 1999.
Your Excellency, to receive the Queen's Service Medal for Public Services, Detective Sergeant Peter Burt of Timaru. Detective Sergeant Burt, with the rank of Inspector, was a member of the New Zealand Police contingent which served in East Timor from June to September 1999 as part of the United Nations Civilian Police. Throughout his posting, he worked under difficult conditions and frequently in hostile environments. Sergeant Burt provided protection for the local Valental commander, who was being sought by the head of the Atarak militia. On one occasion, when he was sent by helicopter with other officers to help evacuate UN electoral workers, he again came under attack by the militia. During full-scale battle between independents and Atarak militia outside the Dili headquarters compound, which in turn came under attack and gunfire, he managed to help defuse a situation which could have become a major tragedy. Constable Bruce Davies of Rotorua and Constable Rangi Maniapoto of Wanganui. Constables Davies and Maniapoto, both with the temporary rank of sergeant, were members of the New Zealand Police contingent serving in East Timor from June to September 1999 as part of the United Nations Civilian Police. They worked in a constantly dangerous environment in the Ainaro area. While hoping to protect the district electoral officer, they came under attack from members of the militia who were attempting to stop a meeting to explain the election process. After the electoral officer escaped, they managed to fend off 15 militia with plastic chairs and tables. On another occasion, Sergeants Davies and Maniapoto went to the aid of the district electoral officer, whose house with a young family in it, was under attack by a large group of militia. In the course of this confrontation, a large dagger was pointed in the face of Sergeant Davies. In late August, following a fatal shooting, major civil disorder broke out in Dili and both officers came under heavy fire. Inspector Brent Holmes of Auckland. Inspector Holmes has served in the New Zealand Police since 1972. In 1990, he was appointed Logistics Officer for the Auckland Commonwealth Games. In 1994, he became second in charge of planning for the Commonwealth Heads of Government Conference in Auckland and was promoted to Special Operations Planning. Inspector Holmes was later involved in policing for the APEC meeting and the America's Cup Regatta. Senior Sergeant John Moran of Rotorua. Senior Sergeant Moran, who joined the New Zealand Police in 1965, is an expert in the police staff safety program. In the Māori Responsiveness Program, he delivers training and education on the meaning of the Treaty of Waitangi and is regarded by local Ngāti Toa as the kaitaki or guardian of things Māori at the Police College. Senior Sergeant Moran is the current national selector for the Black Ferns women's rugby team and selector and coach for local women's rugby. Mr. Brian Palmer of Christchurch. Mr. Palmer was the driving force behind the establishment in 1994 of a local community watch scheme credited with helping reduce crime in the Papanui Police District. This group now has over 40 members who work closely with local police. He also regularly helps monitor crime cameras at the Central Police Station. For 13 years, Mr. Palmer has volunteered 2 out of 4 Saturday nights between 7 and midnight at the police kiosk in Cathedral Square. Mr. Michael Todd of Pukekohe. Mr. Todd has been an outstanding police youth aid worker, recognised throughout New Zealand for his pioneering work. The strategy he devised for the serious and complex nature of prosecuting cases of domestic violence proved most successful. Mr. Todd has coached and refereed junior boys rugby for 15 years. He has worked as a St. Joseph's trustee and with the Pukekohe Youth Council and has raised substantial funds for the Pukekohe Ronald McDonald Charity Golf Tournament. Mrs. Pat Wells of Uranui. Mrs. Wells has been heavily involved in local government for many years and is an advocate for rural communities. She has taken special interest in Age Concern, the Museum and Art Gallery, and Tourism Taranaki. She is an active past and present member of many local groups and clubs for young wives, including the Plunket and the Women's Division of Federated Farmers. Mrs. Wells chaired the Uranui Community Centre Building Committee. Your Excellency, the investiture is now completed.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that completes the formalities. I'd just like to add a few informal words, if I may. First of all, to again congratulate all those who've come forward to receive honours this morning. And then to say that what always strikes me on these occasions, and I'm sure must have struck all of you, whether you are recipients or not, is the enormous diversity of talents and service that is displayed here today. People doing all sorts of things in all sorts of ways, people doing brave things, people doing hard jobs, people doing devoted service to their fellows, people working away quietly, some people who are known nationally, even internationally, some people who are known in their own communities, some people who aren't known to anybody except those few perhaps whose lives they've touched. All of them people who show, I think, that this New Zealand of ours, no matter what bad press sometimes we get, is really underneath a compassionate and a vital and caring society. And so I think that an occasion like this demonstrates that, and that's why I always find it so exciting and so humbling. Sometimes people wonder at the desirability of having an honours system, of recognising particular people. And I think that for two reasons it's very important that we should do this. One is that I believe it important that people should realise that what they do is recognised and appreciated. I know none of you here have set out to do the things for which you've been honoured today with today in mind. You haven't done it for recognition, you've done it for other reasons. But the fact that you are recognised, that you are appreciated, I think is important for the sake of people themselves who do work away as you all have. But then I think it's good for the community to recognise and to honour those who serve it well. Because in this way we hold up role models, really, examples. We say to the rest of the community, this is how you should live in a civilised and caring society. This is the sort of role you should strive to follow. And I think an occasion like this demonstrates that, and it's very important from that point of view, in my view. Now, some of you have said to me as you've come up, well, I'm not quite sure why I'm here. I'm part of a team, others have done just as much, others have done more. Perhaps there are two things I can say about that. And the first is that you didn't nominate yourselves, obviously. People who nominate themselves don't get here. And someone has thought, and more than one person has thought, now this person deserves to be recognised, and they put your name forward. But of course many of you are part of a team, and perhaps you'll see your recognition today as being a recognition of the team as a whole, and you as being representative of them. Well, whatever the reason that brings you here, whatever the work that you've done, whatever the success you've achieved, whatever the service you've given, I'm sure that you should all feel, and your families especially should feel proud and delighted that you're here today and at the honour that you've received. And I again want to congratulate you all and say thank you to you all for what you've done for our country. Now that will conclude even that informal part of proceedings. In a moment we're going to open the doors to my right and behind me. There's refreshments awaiting you through the doors. You're most welcome, please, to move through the ground floor of the house. We are temporary custodians of this house, which has some rather fine and beautiful things in it, and we're delighted to share them with you, to whom they really belong. So please feel at liberty to look about the house. And as I think the sun's shining, if you'd like to afterwards, the grounds too, which we get great pleasure out of. But before we finally depart for refreshments, I'd ask you to join with me in singing the first verse of God Defend New Zealand.